Hey everybody, and welcome to the next edition of the Soccer Fitness Goals video blog. Today on the blog, I'm going to be discussing a topic that I wrote about a few years ago. I've been talking about it and complaining about it for even longer than that, and unfortunately, it's a problem that still exists today, and that is the over-congestion of the competitive season in Canadian inter-university soccer. So first of all, what do I mean by over-congestion? Well, simply put, it means too many soccer games are played in the competitive season without enough time in between those games to recover and rest. There's been a lot of research published in the last 10 to 15 years looking into the amount of recovery time that players need in order to perform optimally in soccer and also specifically to avoid overtraining and overuse injuries. And pretty much universally, it has been suggested based on the literature that playing more than one competitive 90-minute soccer game per week over a sustained period of time is going to be a problem because players will not be able to recover adequately. So that being said, here's the problem with the Canadian inter-university soccer schedule. What we'll do is we will put up some of the information underneath me now related to the OUA, that's Ontario University Athletics, soccer schedule for men's and women's. And it's not really difficult to see. It's basically a 16-game season that's run over 8 weeks. And if you do the math, that works out to 2 games per week. As if that weren't bad enough, again, we'll show a little bit more information about the actual schedule and when the games are. The great majority of the games are played over the weekend, which means that players have to play 2 90-minute games back-to-back, one on Saturday, one on Sunday. And I can speak to this. It's 2017 now, so the last year that I played Canadian inter-university soccer was the 2004 season, and I lived it. We played every weekend from the last weekend in August or the first weekend in September all the way into the end of October. 2 games a week, Saturday, Sunday. Now, there are some exceptions where there are midweek games, but even so, you're still playing 2 games a week. It's still not good for you, and it still prevents any possibility of optimal recovery. Unfortunately, it gets even worse. As if that competitive season schedule wasn't bad enough, once you get into the playoffs, again, we'll show some information here relating to Ontario, but in the other conferences and in the other provinces around the country, it really isn't that different. You're basically in a situation where you're going to have to play 3 or maybe 4 games over about a span of between 1 week to 10 days. So again, that goes into a ratio of even more than 2 games per week. It's actually about 2.5. And if you somehow manage to get through that and you go to compete for a national championship, well, the national championship schedule isn't better at all. It basically begins with an opening match. Typically, that will be on a Thursday. If you win it, then you're lucky. You'll get the Friday off, but then you'll play a semifinal match on Saturday, and then if you win that, of course, you have the final on Sunday. Even if you lose your first match on Thursday, what you end up doing for the most part is playing your next round of matches on Friday, and then if you win that, you may play Saturday again. So to win a national title or even to compete for it, you're basically ending up playing 3 games in 4 days. So overall, we've got 16 games in the regular season. We've got 3 or possibly 4 in the playoffs, so do the math, round that up to 20. And then you've got 3 more games in the national championships. So that's 23 competitive 90-plus minutes, because the playoffs could be longer than 90 minutes. So that's 23 competitive matches over the span of about 10 to 11 weeks. Simply put, this is way too much soccer with not nearly enough recovery time. So I mentioned that I wrote an article about this 2 years ago, and I'd like to speak a little bit more about that. And what we'll do again underneath me now is we'll put up the link to that article. And the title of that article was "How Canadian Inter-University Soccer is Hurting Young Canadian Soccer Players." And I would have to highlight in that title the word "hurting," because it is hurting young soccer players. Again, I lived through it as a player for 5 years. I've been an assistant coach and a fitness coach with many different men's and women's university teams in Ontario, and I can tell you firsthand that when I say that competitive schedule is hurting players, it's true. Every single player that's consistently part of the starting 11 is lucky if they can get to the end of the season without at least picking up one or two overuse injuries. And in the worst case, a lot of times they end up having to miss games consistently, not because they're not fit and not because they've had any bad, traumatic or contact-related injuries, but specifically because of overuse soft tissue injuries like hamstrings, hips and groins, calves, Achilles tendons, all of those. And unfortunately, those are the kind of injuries which really can be considered preventable. I'm a fitness coach, and a big role and responsibility of a fitness coach in any high-level environment is to keep players healthy. And a lot of times, fitness coaches are judged and evaluated in their performance based on how many of the starting 11 end up actually playing a full 90 minutes for every game. And again, in these competitive university environments, we are hurting our young players. We're preventing them from being able to recover because of the number of games that they have to play without enough recovery in between. And the results are inevitable. The results are overtraining and overuse injuries. So what's the solution to this problem? Well, in my article, I had suggested 3 potential solutions, and I will reiterate those 3 right now. The first is that potentially the schedule can be changed from having 2 games back-to-back every weekend on Saturday and Sunday to having a midweek game, for example, on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and then a game on the weekend on a Saturday or Sunday. This is not ideal if you still go with 2 games a week because you still end up with a lot of the same problems, but it's still better than having back-to-back games because at least you're giving players 1, 2, or even 3 potential days off or days of recovery in between each game. The second solution should be obvious, and that is to decrease the total number of competitive games in the season. If you know you have only 8 weeks, there's no reason why you have to have 16 games and have every team, for example, in Ontario play every other team twice. I'm sure you could still come up with a reasonable schedule that gives everyone a fair chance with a 10, 12, or 14 game season. And in keeping with that mentality, solution or potential solution number 3 would be also to decrease the number of games in the playoffs and in the national championships. I'm sure the OUA and U Sports, the Canadian Inter-University Sport Federation, could come up with some kind of a ranking system that allows for more regional playoff games or potentially even less playoff games in the regional side of things so that only the best teams from every region end up progressing into the Final Four, and then only the top 1 potentially, or maybe the top 2 in a province that's a little bit more successful, go into the national championship. And this would allow, rather than, as I mentioned, a playoff period where you have 2 weeks and you play 6 or 7 games in those 2 weeks, maybe you could whittle that down to 4 games or maybe 5. Again, these are not all ideal solutions, but at least they prevent the impossible schedule of 2+ games per week over a 8 to 12 week period. So ultimately, if we in Canada truly care or truly mean what we say when we say that we truly care about the health of our young soccer players, then I would recommend that we take action and change the nature of the competitive season in Canadian Inter-University Soccer, decrease the number of games, and increase the amount of rest that players get in between each game. So that's it for the Soccer Fitness Goals video blog for this week. Hope you enjoyed it. As always, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. You can do it by clicking the link underneath me now. Also, if you'd like to download the world's only customized, soccer-specific, at-home mobile fitness app, you can do that with our Soccer Fitness Goals app. The link to download it is beneath me now. We'll see you next week on the blog, and until then, keep reaching your soccer fitness goals.